What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one-armed madman. And with me today, we've got Don Holoman. And, Don is so beautiful. He's like Medusa, but beautiful. If you look at him, you turn to stone. So we had to keep his camera off. Otherwise, we'd just be killing people with this podcast. So thanks for coming on, Don. And thanks for not turning my audience to stone.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
No problem. Hey, so you've got a great line in your bio here that I really loved. It says, "In my defense, I am an engineer, and the whole of our present civilization rests upon the skills of engineers." I thought that's a great statement. What got you into engineering? What kind of engineering do you do, and why do we owe our lives to engineers?
Well, I would have been a mechanical engineer, but I wasn't good enough at math. So I'm a civil engineer. I've worked up north of the Arctic Circle. I was a chief government engineer for the Marshall Islands for a year. I've done aerospace projects, bomb racks, designed a test facility for testing bomb racks. I've worked on farms. I've been in the military, engineers, communications, pilot, scuba diver. When I was young, I picked beans and picked potatoes behind the machine that dug them out of the ground, like for 2 cents a pound sort of thing. Back in the day when money was, gold was $32 an ounce. So I'm an old guy.
Yeah, that's all right.
I have a little perspective that most people don't.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's some serious work experience. So I also worked not in the Arctic Circle, but I did a winter in North Dakota doing line work. And man,
I grew up in Canada.
Yeah,
when I was going to school, it didn't get above minus 20.
Yeah, that's
for like 80 days.
Yeah, I know it. Like in North Dakota, when it first started getting cold, they bring us into the shop, and they're like, "Hey, don't turn the trucks off until February." We're like, "What?" Like, yeah, don't turn the trucks off till February. If you turn it off, you're not going to get it back on. If you turn it off out on the job site or the thing, breaks down, you're going to die. So make sure you've got service and make sure you leave your trucks on. And yeah, man, it was like negative 30 for a couple of months. And like, normal people do not understand how cold that is. Like, I remember at one point my mom was like, "Is negative 30 really that much colder than zero? Like, we've gone snow skiing in zero before, and it's not that bad. Like, is it really that much difference?" And I'm like, yeah, it's like the difference between 80 degrees and 120 degrees.
It was minus 40 with a 40-mile-an-hour wind. I still had to milk the cow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, someone's got to do it, right?
Family cow, you have to. It was my job as soon as I got my driver's license.
So what got you into engineering?
Well, my dad probably would have been an engineer if he'd been able to afford the schooling. I grew up with a shop, wood lathe, metal lathe, bandsaw, jigsaw, all the hand tools, etc. So I came by it naturally. I grew up, I was good at math. I was dyslexic, so dyslexia is one of those curses that is a blessing because you automatically have to learn to solve problems. Otherwise, you don't survive.
Yeah.
And so I'm a good problem solver, and engineering was a natural thing to go into. My older brother, was an engineer. My younger brother is an engineer. My second younger brother, or my son, is an engineer, one of them. So, it's just sort of that way.
Yeah, I after I got hurt doing line work, I went into like retraining. So workers' comp paid for me to go to, a small school here in Idaho. And in the beginning, I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't really care. I'm just gonna do the easiest path and just kind of get through this and get paid while I'm doing it. And about halfway through, I decided, I was like, man, I was good at line work. Like I grew up same as you. Like we had tools everywhere. I was a motocross racer, so you kind of had to like understand how a bike works. You have to understand how suspension works and like the theory behind suspension if you want to get your bike running right. So I decided about halfway through, I was like, I should be an electrical engineer. I already, know electricity pretty well. Like I don't think it'll be too bad, but unfortunately I was a little too far in and I couldn't switch majors at that time. It would have just been too much on me. So maybe someday, but for now I've got a liberal arts degree.
There are some advantages of liberal arts. I wish I had at least taken more than one creative writing course. I would probably be a better writer.
Yeah, I didn't learn grammar as a kid. And like now as a writer, I write, and it's so important to like be able to express yourself in writing. Just even like if you want to write a book or just if you're at work and your boss is being a dick, like you really need to be able to express yourself in a letter in a great way. Like I'm trying to hammer this into my little brother because he just doesn't care about English at all. And I didn't care about English as a kid either. But like now that I did learn how to write, I look back in situations where I was like, man, I could have made people look stupid at work if I just knew how to write a proper letter. I could have gotten, the boss to go a different direction. I could have gotten this and made my life easier. All I needed to do was be able to write a good letter. And I just never learned how to do it until I was 30 years old.
Well, I sympathize. I have, after like 60 years of practice, I'm actually getting pretty good at it. I see stuff, but being dyslexic, it takes me 10 times through to get down on paper what was in my head the
Yeah.
way I want it.
I can relate to that. Me as an amputee, I can't type properly. So I've got to I use an iPad for everything. And my iPad has this great predictive keyboard. So I can kind of write with one finger pretty quickly. But when you start getting into like book territory, it gets pretty gnarly. Like I get gnarly cramps in the hand and the
about
finger.
20,000 words. And all my books are over 100.
Yeah, that's a lot of writing, and it really like starts to weigh on you after a while. Like I don't know about you, but like my wrist gets sore, I get the carpal tunnel. It's gnarly, but it's good to be able to express yourself in that way. Like you, I'm a massive science fiction fan. I know you're a big science fiction guy, and like the way that some of these not like necessarily the early sci-fi writers, but like somebody like Larry Niven, who's just my favorite. I think you can open up any Larry Niven book and end it happily. And like that guy was such a capable writer. And I read his books and I go, man, I can never write like this fucking guy.
I'm more a Heinlein person, but yeah, Niven, pardon me. Niven was a very good writer.
Yeah. Who are some of your influences in sci-fi?
Oh, Heinlein, Murray, Linkster, McCaffrey, and McCaffrey. A little more fantasy, but a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one feature in my main series as kind of harkens to that, her writing a little bit. But I think as much as anything, I'm influenced by Louis L'Amour and not Conrad. That's one of those things. I get blank spots till I can think about it.
I know.
He wrote the Jungle Books and Rudyard Kipling.
I know who you're talking about.
And I loved, Quentin Durard. You remember that? Heard of that book?
I have not. No.
He also wrote anyway. Arthur Conan Doyle was very good. I learned a lot from him, especially his science or his historical novels. I
Yeah.
don't know. Most people have never heard of them, but the White Company I really recommend.
Oh, interesting. I haven't read that one. Yeah, I like Camus also. He's kind of like a little bit more like not so sci-fi, but like his books are pretty wild. You know, they're not like space battles and space opera and stuff like that, but like they're pretty good. You know, he gets into it.
With me being an engineer, my only excuse, my what I do is I take a character, a situation, a current engineering knowledge of whatever, and just try to extrapolate it, 2 or 3 generations in the future. What are we going to do? I mean, in high school, you learned that E equals mc squared, and C is a constant, and then it's 300K per second. Okay. Then the next year they said, oh, there's black holes out there, and gravity is so great light can't leave. But nobody in the class, none of the teachers ever said, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If C is a constant, it can't, that's impossible. So obviously the speed of light is, under at least some circumstances, is not a constant. So that's what I use and develop that idea. So that that's the basis of my faster than light travel.
Oh, interesting.
So I explain something that is known to everybody, has never been explained. So I use it as a means of doing the faster than light idea.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because that's something I'm interested in. Like I said, I'm a writer as well, and the book that I'm working on has UFOs in it, and I've been doing a lot of research and trying to figure out how these things would work or could work. And
Wow.
one of the things I've been
Cheat.
What's that?
I kind of cheat
Okay,
because
cool.
I ignore the physics and just take the basic idea that there is a contradiction there and say, well, you know enough math to know what an asymptotic curve is.
Okay.
It's one that starts just parallel to zero and then starts going up and ends up parallel to infinity. Well, if we're where we are with a gravitational constant, or whatever Earth is, or this galaxy is, it's 300,000 miles per or kilometers per second. Mm-hmm. So we know that if when gravity goes to infinity, the speed of light goes to zero. Okay, so if we can somehow exclude the influence of gravity totally, then wouldn't it make sense that the speed of light, call me back later, please. The speed of light should go to infinity. Just kind of like that's the way it is.
Yeah.
If one is asymptotic, the other should be asymptotic.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm looking into on these things is what's called macroscopic quantum coherence, and that's I'm sure know what I'm talking about.
A little bit about it, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, like in a superconductor, you get these quantum, events that manifest in a macroscopic way. So that's how you get a conductor with zero resistance. So if you can take a machine that, like a cigar craft or one of these, tic tacs that we're seeing like that, and you can make these things into a macroscopic quantum event, they can act in ways that defy physics, which is a very strange thing. Like when you originally start thinking about these things and you go, well, that sounds wild. How could you have a quantum event in a macroscopic object? But we do it with superconductors. So I found that to be a very interesting thing.
Yeah, well, it's basically all that is kind of background. What I have them do is there's a superconductor super collider, and when they change power settings, occasionally they get an anomalous event.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
over time, uh, enough events accumulate that they're able to do some correlation and some design work, and they figure out that because of the physics of it, the events are that the particles arrive before they're supposed to. After they're sent, but before they're supposed to get there.
That's interesting. So what kind of collider are you using? Is this something like the LHC and CERN, or do you have to build something bigger with more powerful?
That's my initial proposal, is that unnamed location, unnamed machine, that this is happening, like especially when they're cutting power or something and they're still transmitting particles and they arrive before they're supposed to. And so somebody eventually comes up with an big words, explanation for that. And it's that under some conditions, you can actually go faster than the speed of light.
Interesting.
So they have to figure out how, and over time they finally figure out and that, oh, okay, you just have to do all this, really jump through the hoops with physics.
Have you heard of a book called The Three Body Problem?
No.
It's written by a Chinese author and then translated into English. It's very, very good. I won't give you the whole scoop, but they are essentially it covers an alien invasion of Earth, and it's from a very real perspective. It's very hard science fiction, but it gets pretty out there. So what the aliens do is they are living in a system that has three suns, essentially. So their planet is getting whipped around. It's freezing cold. It's burning hot. So these beings have found a way to dehydrate themselves during the roughest periods, and then they can kind of rehydrate during the golden eras, right? And so they realize that, humans, us, we don't have to deal with these time spans. Like, we're just creating things constantly. So they go, all right, like, our technology is better than theirs right now, but in the time it's going to take us to get there, their technology is going to leapfrog us by leaps and bounds. So what they do is they take, I hope I don't mess this up. They take a single proton and unfold it into two dimensions and then finally into a single dimension, and they wrap it around their planet and then encode it with computer parts and then fold it back down into a single proton again. And then they shoot two of these things at Earth. And what these things do is now there's this artificial intelligent proton, and they infiltrate our particle accelerators and screw up all the results. So essentially, like, we couldn't make any advances in physics until we figure out how to get rid of these freaking protons, which, a proton is so tiny. How are you going to find a single proton on a planet? So anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but it just kind of jogged my memory on the whole particle collider thing.
Well, what I have is, and I have the draft for a book. After writing all these other books, I figured, hey, how did they actually get into space? So I finally went back and I have a draft now finished, but it still needs a lot of work. But of how they leave Earth, the type of people. It's more a people book than the math behind it. But it's the people work, and then the politics and so on. They get to a nearby, relatively speaking, nearby star where there's a habitable planet. And they find conditions to be suitable but dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Just think of anything about, you ever read Louis L'Amour and about brush popping?
No, I have not.
The steers, the longhorns, would get out back in the brush and the brambles, and the cowboys would have to go into these bramble forests to get the cows out. And they were called brush poppers. And it's you get scraped up and cut up, and that's why they wear these heavy leather chaps.
Okay.
Is because so that they don't get their legs all shredded. Anyway, those some of those beasts get really mean and nasty, especially the old what's called mossy backs, steers or bulls,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll attack anybody on a horse. Some of them. So just think of something like that with horns that are instead of out to the side, they're more to the front, and they are about 3 times the weight of an elephant.
Oh, wow. So big animals.
Big animals, and they get mad, and they come, and they keep coming, and you kill one, and 2 more appear, and you kill those, and there's 3 or 4 more, and until the whole herd is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And since they go in fairly large herds, they also need very large grazing areas. So they're only a problem for, while they're going by, but they can be a big problem during that period.
Are they tasty?
Oh yeah, they good eating.
All right, nice.
And the hide is so tough, you can really do a lot with it.
Oh, cool. You know what? Like one thing that really bothers me about modern sci-fi, and especially on the TV end of it, not so much in the books because the books are a lot better than the TV. But like, there's this show that I really liked that got canceled. It's called Raised by Wolves, and it's about these androids who get sent. Like Earth is in this big, massive war between like a technological civilization and like a religious civilization that's also technological, but they, see things differently and get in a massive war. So everybody's
sounds familiar.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So they get to this planet, which is orbiting Alpha Centauri, and it's a paradise. It's just it's more beautiful and more lush than Earth is. And it just bothers me because like you were saying, your planet is rough and hard to live on. And I think that's like our local galaxy, our local neighborhood in the galaxy. Like that's what we're going to be finding. And it bothers me because I think that they are so anti-human. For the most part, a lot of the people making these movies they're very anti-human. They think that we're a plague on our planet and that, as soon as we can get away from this disgusting cesspool, like things are just going to be so much better. I think I think it's the exact opposite. I think we're on the paradise and we're going to be wandering for 40 years in the desert as soon as we leave this place.
Unfortunately, I think it's our own fault. There's just actually only that percentage that is trying to do that. And it's a fairly small percentage. They have power because they have no morals and they do whatever to make money.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've lost the thought.
but it's also like an ideology thing. It's not just about money. Like they can make money on the show.
Oh, absolutely.
If that planet is like the planet, we know that planet that they're talking about would be tidally locked, and it would be orbiting a red dwarf, which is a star that pukes out massive solar flares all the time. So it's like there's going to be a very small sliver of that planet in between, like the night and the day zone where like creatures might live. But aside from that, like that planet is going to be hell. It's going to be Africa on one side and Antarctica on the other, with a little bit of North Dakota in the middle.
Yeah. The people that get so excited about it need to. I always wonder what they would do if I presented my ideas on near space industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that at all?
Absolutely. Moon Industrial Complex.
Yeah. And solar power satellites.
Yes.
My standard idea for a solar power satellite is 10 kilometers by 20 kilometers. That means today, if it was up there, it would be putting in roughly $3 billion worth of electricity into the grid per month.
Yeah.
And
it's wild.
That's at 7% efficiency.
Wow.
You can double the efficiency to 14%. It's $6 billion a month, which makes each one of those satellites worth what? $500 billion?
Yeah. It's wild. And if you're really worried about climate change, like that's
That's
the
it. Yeah,
answer, you know,
that's
and
the
and
answer.
and we can
Absolutely.
control the temperature of the earth with those things. They're like a thermostat, right? The one thing that I've wondered about this, and I haven't done the research on these, and I'm guessing you have, so maybe you can answer this for me, is I'm guessing like in your situation, it's going to be a photovoltaic that converts electricity to microwaves, beams it down into a collector, and then transmits and then converts it back into electricity again. Is that correct?
More or less. I
Okay.
don't think photovoltaics is the way that is most efficient on that scale.
Okay. That
I
that
think
part of it doesn't matter for my question. My
the
question is is
collector,
is is the beam, the microwave beam, is that going to be cooking birds?
um, mostly it's like standing in front of a microwave oven. You get a little leakage. Uh, the density of it, I have read studies. I'm not a doctor, so I really don't know that much about it, or a biologist. But from what I understand, you could put stands up, put them up like 12 feet high, 20 feet high, and you could have cattle grazing safely underneath them.
Oh, okay.
So you could, my idea is you'd go a couple of mountain ranges and you just string cables over and put your receptors above the valley. It doesn't really affect the sunlight significantly because it's all just wires basically.
Yeah.
And you could just live normally underneath.
That's cool. I like it. You know, like I said, I hadn't done the research, but I know like the theory is so sound. I mean, you're going to be able
Yeah,
your
you might
panels
get
are
a
going to be
little bit of
way
like
more
a
efficient up there
sunshade.
in space than they are in the atmosphere.
Well, it's 1 kilowatt per square meter,
Okay.
24/7.
Okay. All right. So while we're talking about near space like industry, how are you getting ships off the ground? Are you using like launch tubes or like what do they call those orbital rings with hooks on them? How are you getting these big heavy ships?
Electromagnetic launch.
Magnetic launch. Interesting.
Eventually, I think electromagnetic launch. I have it in my book called Ghost Planet that
Okay.
they have that, and that's the main way they get up. Uh, if you have a 20-kilometer long, I have a very high mountain in that book,
Mhm.
so it probably wouldn't be that good, but 20 kilometers long, and you'll be spitting it out in like what, 17 seconds.
Oh wow. So
So you're
very
traveling
fast.
like Mach 3 by the time you get to the end of the tube. You're accelerating at up to 100 Gs. I mean, if it's a real heavy launch, you'll not accelerate quite that much toward the end because you just can't put that much energy through the superconducting magnets. But you can still get 70, 80% of the total uh, energy into space using electromagnetic launch.
And is
What
that
I
on?
propose, what I propose is taking like something like a 747. You chop the cabin off, you reinforce what's left, of course, put a titanium tail on it, and you have a uh, shuttle followed by a flyback booster, and in between you have a small rocket uh, for the transition, and then of
Mhm.
course the shuttle has some acceleration deceleration capabilities, and then you have a deck. You put it, 500. You can have basically a 200-ton load on it, or no,
Wow.
pardon me, that's 200,000 pounds, not 200 tons.
Yeah. Okay. 200.
200,000 pounds,
I was like,
a little
wow.
more, 200 to 300,000 pounds
Wow.
take on.
And
The,
that's with
the rated weight for the really heavy load 747s was 500,000 pounds.
okay. And
So 300,000 pounds should be within the fully realm. And if you cut off most of the cabin, probably you don't gain that much because you have to reinforce everything. but still, I think it's totally doable. Then also, if when you have a cargo ship that like is going to the moon, it's basically no return capability. So your actual cargo that you get up into space is going to be a heck of a lot more per launch.
Yeah.
And your launch vehicle might be significantly bigger.
Now, and this is with like today's technology. We have the technology to do that
Yeah,
today. Like,
everything I've said just now is totally doable
yeah.
right now.
I wondered like why Elon Musk is spending so much money on these vertical, landing
Well,
landing
I
rockets
would
when you could
I
do
would
something like
suggest
this.
to Elon that instead of going to Mars direct, he needs to go near space industrialization first. You build up a massive manufacturing capability building the satellites. You're going to be getting all sorts of trace elements out of the lunar material you refine.
Oh,
So you're going to have titanium, steel, uh, all the elements that are in the moon, basically,
yeah.
because your main element for building those big satellites is going to be glass.
Okay.
You probably do a titanium or whatever sheet, and then you inject foam and foamed glass into the interior. You use glass fiber tendons, which you post stress. So everything is nice and then it'll withstand shocks and loads because
Mhm.
glass is very brittle in tension. And then you assemble it into a big three-dimensional grid, and then you build the collector on one face, and you will have say you take up uh, power generators, steam generators.
Mhm.
They're the most efficient, the most longest history in space. There's no weight to do it. It's an ideal operating condition for them. They should last much longer than on space as long as you get nice pure water or properly doped water so that the erosion is minimum. And then you just convert it, send it down to microwaves.
Man, that's freaking cool. And once we get good at something like that, all we need is really like good automation. If we can figure out how to mine these materials and extract the good stuff, get rid of the bad, and make these solar panels, then you can start doing something like a Dyson swarm, where you just send one spacecraft or a couple spacecraft to Mercury, you have them land, they start mining and creating these solar panels and just launching them into the orbit around the sun. And now you've got this massive collection of energy where you can build things like massive spaceships where you can actually travel to different stars. And so here's one. Like modern sci-fi kind of hinges on fusion reactors. Like fusion energy seems like the only way that they're wanting to travel to stars. Do you think fusion's going to be necessary, or is some more exotic energy or less exotic going to be?
Well, I have them create what I call a brute force drive.
Mhm.
They've spent billions and a generation or two trying to get fission energy. Okay, they've got things that work, but the problem is they all tend to leak, right?
Mhm.
Well, if you could use that leakage to your advantage, where it leaks, you just turn it into a nozzle. You inject, you design a real nifty thing where you know what a buckyball is.
Yes.
Okay, you stuff the buckyball full of heavy hydrogen. Then you send it through very high acceleration, very short term acceleration through a reactor and into a harmonic point in your uh, field into your combustion chamber for your fission drive.
Mhm.
Then it goes immediately flashes to plasma because of the temperature and pressure. And then certain percentage, half a percent, a tenth of a percent, a hundredth of a percent, whatever, of the hydrogen, heavy hydrogen, turns to helium, and it produces enough energy to keep everything propagating, and the leakage comes out at maybe what, half the speed of light?
Yeah, and that's your thrust.
Quarter, and that's your brute force drive.
Yeah.
So it takes at that sort of acceleration, it takes very little mass to give a whole bunch of punch.
Yeah, there's a great YouTube channel. I'll send you a link to after we're done with this. A guy named Isaac Arthur. He does a show called Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. And one of his sayings is, if you can't get it done with brute force, you're not using enough of it.
Don't force it. Get a bigger hammer.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways,
that's the engineering sort of approach.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So
maybe that's the farmer approach in me.
Yeah, right. Like,
I've worked on farms, so driven all the type of farm equipment, etc.
So you were saying earlier that one of your like methods for writing is you kind of sit back and look at what you think the world is going to look like 10, 20, 30 years in the future. What are some of the like technological things that we're going to see in 20, 30 years, and then maybe some of the social aspects as well?
Well, socially, that's addressed in my first book, which is called Disruption, which it's going to take a while before it comes out because I'm working on the ones that are, more nearly complete.
Okay.
But in The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he talks about the Battle of Agincourt. I'm not sure if you've ever familiar with it.
No, I'm not.
That's where there was a massive die-off from arrows, longbow arrows, of the European nobility. There was such a slaughter of the knights and men-at-arms and so on that a lot of the castles and so on, the Hungary, Germany, etc., France, Austria, there weren't any men. I mean, there may have been a few children if they got around to it before they went off to battle, but there was a massive, I mean, the royalty at the time, the nobility and the higher ups that right under them, there really weren't that many in Europe. And after Agincourt, there was a huge deficit of males. That was when the people started getting some mobility because they didn't have enough men at arms and so on to keep them on their land, so they could actually more or less safely leave and go someplace where the conditions were better. And two, there weren't enough people around to farm and raise the crops. So it led to all kinds of disruption and social change. Now, by the time, Germany, World War I, and somewhat before that, the populations had started to get much bigger again, partly because without serfdom, there was a lot more innovation. I mean, everything has a cause. If you understand the dynamics of civilization, you can understand somewhat what might happen when something happens, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's never in isolation. You've heard of Black Swan event.
Absolutely.
So
you can't model Godzilla.
Yeah, but if you look at it and you project, okay, there's going to be a plague, Black Death. What was the result of the Black Death? I mean, there were a lot of fairly predictable results, from hindsight at least, that were caused by all the different changes in social behavior. So, I go into that and I try to project those sort of things in the stories that I tell in my books. So that is my mental laboratory,
Mm-hmm.
spitting out stuff for consumption, hopefully entertainment, hopefully uh, heroes. I think we need more heroes in literature today, but
Absolutely.
also educational, the science, some of the science involved, some of the, I mean, I have in one called Heartstar, it's also with the publisher. Uh, I have, they prove up this planet and they sell it. They know that there's might be a problem because there's very high heavy metals in the soil. So in the soil and earth plants, each generation, when they replant the seed from the last generation, it picks up more heavy metal.
Okay.
So after about 6 years, you can't eat the grain because you get poisoned by it. So the company, there was a war, it ended, there was a big recession. The company is looking for ways to keep their dividends up. They say, oh, this planet, they found bonanza level discoveries of diamonds and gold and platinum and et cetera, and organics that are good for medicine, et cetera, mm-hmm. and even pearls. So they have a problem. We've been sending them loads of grain so they could, so they don't get poisoned. Why don't we just have them renegotiate the sales contract for 5 or 10 or 20 times what we told them the first time? Mm-hmm. So the war's just over. There's lots of surplus warships being sold off. They take the weapons out, but then they buy them back in the black market and reinstall them and blockade the planet. Mm. Well, the heroes in this series arrives because they have capability to fight, a lot of it. They get in safely. They are little questioned, apprehensive. The people are apprehensive, but they show them that they've got weapons technology for sale, etc. And they get in. They help them overcome the heavy metals poisoning problem. They introduce new technology to do various things, and eventually they get a lot of that gold, and they leave to the next adventure for the next book. But in that book, I talk about all the things necessary and important for developing technology, ball bearings, high quality fiber optic cable, computers, printing, 3D printing, mm-hmm. all kinds of different technologies that most people are not aware of. I mean, agriculture. Okay, if your food's poisoning you because you can't grow it on normal land, how do you grow enough food to stay alive? So I come up with solutions, and then, buried in the reports that research they've already done, there's things that are not recognized. So they do it. Okay, they think this might work. So they try it. It works, but it has repercussions that cause other problems that actually solve problems. Mm-hmm. So how do you take a problem, solve it, and make money doing it? Anyway,
you're speaking my language. You're speaking my language. Solving problems through capitalism. That is my language. I'm a libertarian, absolutely. And I think like libertarians especially like science fiction because we like to imagine a better world, and in science fiction, it's kind of your own universe in a lot of ways. And
in my book Disruption, selection process is the only reason that the whole idea works. Gotcha. When they get to the new planet.
Gotcha.
You have to have a group that is cohesiveness and has got same goals, etc. Otherwise, everything falls apart.
Yeah, which is kind of why we're falling apart as a nation right now, is because nobody has the same values or goals or morals in this country anymore. We're all just,
too many Leninists around.
Yeah, exactly. Like
and Lenin never figured out how to solve. He saw all the problems, but he never presented any solutions. So what good is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah, it drives me nuts a lot of the way, like, I was watching a show the other day. I think it was Yellowstone. And Yellowstone has done more for like to show like traditional values and traditional lifestyles than any modern politician or newscaster has done. Like it's great. But like the previous, not the newest season, I haven't watched that one yet, but the one before that was kind of about like, you've got this blue-haired liberal crazy woman coming out to protest, and the whole season was like, hey, look, we have more in common than we don't. Like, we need to come together and do this. And it's like, no, that is not the case right now. Like, these people don't. I have nothing in common with somebody who wants to mutilate their child and chastise me for not allowing it. Like, I have nothing in common with these people who think that free speech is a weapon of war. I have nothing in common with people who think that we need to level the Middle East because they're going to come over here and slaughter us. Like,
no matter how reasoned your approach, they're going to either ignore it or say it's wrong.
Yeah, and call us crazy for not, capitulating to their lifestyle. Like
Hitler.
Yeah, exactly. Like this, look, they don't understand why Yellowstone's so popular. It's like, hey, look, we've been demonizing this way of life for the past 30 years, and you're supposed to be listening. Why the hell do you want to watch this? Like, this is evil. But, they don't get it.
What we need to do is put them all in the same city and just let them self-destruct.
Yeah. And, so like the way I've been kind of looking at the future is I think that we're going to have like, and I don't know how far off this is, and I could be wrong, but I imagine a world where San Francisco has physical borders to where you cannot come across the Golden Gate Bridge unless you have a digital ID, a vaccine card, and, your social credit score is at a certain point. Like, otherwise, you're not coming into the city. You're not going to have access to the good technology. You're not going to be able to use the quantum computers. No fusion energy for you. Like, you're going to live out in the country, and you're going to give us, you're going to get the scraps that we allow you to have. All they really want us for is producing their food. And as soon as they can do that in a different way, we have no use to them.
Well, I think that's a very optimistic approach.
Oh, wow.
How are they going to get rid of the homeless and so on so they can actually have something worth going there for?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because their policies are so horrible that you can't imagine it actually being a nice place to live. And I'm not saying that it's going to be a nice place to live. I'm just saying that, like, that's how it's going to be, that there's going to be, dirty, disgusting people who they want zero. I lived in San Francisco for 5 years, so it's not like I'm just shitting on a city that I know nothing about. Like, I lived there in a time where politics didn't matter. This was before Donald Trump. Like, nobody cared that I was from Northern California and that I owned guns and that I didn't, give a shit about political correctness. I was just an oddity, but I was still their friend, and we were still, they knew I was a good person. Now they look at me and they go, oh, this guy got hurt. He moved to Idaho and he went insane. Like, that's the way they look at me. And it's like, I haven't changed at all since I lived in San Francisco. I have one less arm, but that, so I've changed a little bit, I guess, but I'm a little lighter. But like my values and the way I conduct myself is no different today than it was when I lived there. But they just think, oh, he went insane. There's nothing we can do for him. He's one of those crazy people now, and he belongs in Idaho. We don't want him here anymore.
Yeah, I could see Idaho and New York becoming their own countries.
Me too. I open up the show with I call it the future free state of Greater Idaho, because right now, like, Idaho's where it's happening. We've got, I think, half the counties in Oregon want to secede and join Idaho. There's another half a dozen in Northern California that want to do it. People tend to think that, Texas is going to be the spot where something like that happens, but I think it's going to be here in Idaho, and I'm here for it. Like, this is a great spot. When I moved here 8 years ago,
easier up there. There's less people.
Yeah, well,
it's easier to make it happen.
Yeah, well, not so much. Like, I live in the Treasure Valley. I live like 30 miles from Boise, and there's 1 million people in this valley. So, like, we sit in traffic just like, people in California do, but they don't see it that way. They think, oh, you live out in a pasture where, and granted, I do have cows across the street from my house right now, but I also live 2 miles from the freeway. So it's not like I'm just out in the middle of a pasture and I'm completely disconnected from city life. Like Boise's a metropolitan city, but it's going to be a wild one in the next 30 years because the technology that is just over the horizon is very powerful, and it's going to be very, very good for using for control purposes. I think if COVID would have happened 10 years later, we would be living in a completely different world today than we are now. Like for the most part here in Idaho, we've kind of just forgotten about COVID. Nobody really cares anymore. You don't have to wear a mask anywhere. It's just kind of over. But I think, if this happens again,
it's no worse than a bad case of the flu.
Yeah, exactly. But I think if this happens again in 10 years, boy, you better look out. Like you're all going to have your digital ID. You're going to have your digital vaccine card, and it's just going to be on the internet. And there's just nothing we're going to be able to do about it. It's a very scary world that they are planning. Like these big organizations like the World Economic Forum that have tons of money and tons of technology. Like they are not creating the kind of world that we want to live in.
They're creating the world that they have all the power.
Yeah. I mean, we look at 1984 and we go, that's a great story. And it's a great reminder of what not to do. And they're looking at it going, how do we implement this?
I totally agree.
Yeah. Well,
most people don't understand the implications or the results, that the steps that are being taken now.
Yeah. I mean, the slippery slope is so far gone. Like that argument is just, we're on like a slip and slide that's 10 miles high that's covered in oil. Like we're hauling down that thing at 200 miles an hour with no brake.
Unfortunately, you go up another 200 miles, one bomb designed for EMP, and we could easily, the predictions are that 80 to 90% of the population will starve to death.
Yeah, and nobody gets it. Like as a lineman, I look at like EMPs and coronal mass ejections as like the most terrifying thing in the universe to us right now. Like bombs are bad, but like these things are so gnarly. And like if we go out like that, the power's not coming back on. Like as a lineman, if the power's out for a couple weeks, like I've got a family at home that I've got to protect. I can't be out working on lines forever. If it's not back in a couple weeks, I'm done. Like there are massive transformers, step-up transformers that are outside of every power station. These things are huge. They have to be transported from China where they're built in a massive oil-powered tanker ship, and then they have to be dropped onto a railroad and transferred that way. And then you have to have a massive oversized truck to move these things. Like if the power's out all over the planet, we're never replacing those transformers. The power is never coming back on.
And the real scary part is some hunter out there that has had a few to drink and he thinks that's a deer and it's not going down, so he keeps shooting at it. That can kill people.
Absolutely. Easily. Absolutely. It's it's a terror. Like I love the saying ignorance is bliss, right? Because a lot of my buddies who just care about football and dinner, like I try and tell them some of this stuff and they're just like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to go back to work tomorrow and watch the football game. Like they just live in a world where things like this are impossible and it's just stuff you see in a movie. But if the normal average citizen knew how close we are to the Stone Age every day, like we would live in a completely different world because it's just a terrifying aspect. We're literally, like you said, after a couple weeks, it's over. Like we're Mad Max from then on. And it's terrifying.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways. Right. All righty. Well, you got anything else for us? When's your next book coming out? Do you got? I'm a big audiobook guy. Are we going audio on any of these things?
Well, that costs enough money that I can't afford it.
Yeah, I understand.
I think they could be some really fun audiobooks, yes.
Yeah.
But my first publisher basically were scam artists.
Oh,
and I
that
got in
sucks.
debt. And then, so I've gone to another one, and I'm still in debt.
Oh,
I
man.
just can't afford that stuff.
Well, so there's.
I'm hoping that through talking to people such as yourself, that people will be interested enough to go buy the books. And they need to buy the book that says Emigrants from Earth, which is the series name on the cover.
Gotcha.
The other one is still being sold by that first publisher, and I've never gotten a dime ever.
Oh, that blows, man. I'm sorry to hear that. So the books that I tend to listen to on Audible are all put out by a company called Podium Publishing, and they do they essentially just you upload your book to Amazon, and then you submit your Amazon link to them, and if they like your book, they'll pick you up and do audio. I don't know like the details of it, but that's kind of the guys who I like listening
Normally
to.
they get half. They get half of all the revenue from the audiobook.
Well, that's not a terrible deal, I guess. I mean,
no, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, they're so popular that like, yeah, I would do that.
I figured I need to get, 2, 3, 4 books out there before it's worth really doing much.
I agree. It puts me in a bad situation because I'm writing a book and like it's going to take me forever. And I don't think I'm going to do a second one. Like, it's just so hard to type and everything. Like, unless I do very well, which most people don't do very well on their first novels. What's that? Go ahead.
Use the technology that we're talking about. Use text to speech.
I've tried it and it's just hard. It doesn't quite do the same as written, but I'm going to try it a little more.
The technology is a lot better than probably when you tried it.
Could be.
Try it again.
Could be. And it's not just the technology aspect. It's just hard for me to speak the words. Like, I don't know. I'm a slow writer. I'm complaining a lot.
I have to. And
I'm complaining.
I mean, I know what I was trying to put down when I put it down.
Yeah.
So, of course, I go back and expect that to be what's there.
Yeah.
It never is.
No, I always end up like rewriting everything 3 times. Yeah.
The tense is wrong. So it takes me several times through.
Yeah, I get it.
That's the dyslexia, but of course, without the dyslexia, I wouldn't have those ideas because I would never have learned to think that way.
That's a very good point. Like I know I think completely different than most people too.
I'll
like
get it done eventually.
I had 14,400 volts go through my brain, so I think I think different than most people too.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I look forward to reading. I'm going to order your books today. I want to get them all just because I want you to have the funds. So hopefully you can go in and get these things done on audio.
I have a website. It's called emigrantfromearth.com. It lists all the books. Only the Mutiny on the Omaha is available yet, but there will be multiple ones. I was, the publishers, they promised you the moon and deliver asteroids.
Yeah, I can imagine that for sure.
I mean, it's still 3 months, 4 months later, and I got a draft and they screwed the whole thing up.
That's what I worry about is like
my AI text. I put a caret, the little caret thing at the start instead of a quotation mark to designate, so everybody can tell that's the computer talking, the AI intelligences, the AI masters, as I call them. They probably 5 keystrokes and they deleted them all.
That would just drive me nuts. That's one of the things I worry about is like me and you obviously see the world in a similar way. And I would imagine that most publishers don't like the way we see the world. And I just imagine like handing in my thing and them just going, oh yeah, this is a great story, but all of this crap has to go.
Well, I'm dialogue is my hardest thing to write. I'm great at description. It's, very visual writing, but dialogue is like pulling teeth.
Yeah, it's tough.
So when they deleted all that, essentially they deleted all that dialogue from that part of the book, and all the other books, the next books, have a lot more of it because the AIs are an important part of the story. And so I'm for AI in a controlled manner.
Gotcha.
But unfortunately, the AI as it's being done today is not controlled. Chat
GPT.
Whatever.
Yeah. I know you're talking.
Will make up data if you can't find any. And he doesn't prove it out. He doesn't check it out first. So, it's dangerous.
I suggest that anybody who leans heavily on ChatGPT, go have a conversation about it with it on an obscure subject that you know a lot about. So I know a ton about motocross racing. I know everything about motocross racing. I'm an encyclopedia. Having a conversation with ChatGPT about motocross is like pulling teeth. It is so dumb. It knows nothing. It can't look anything up. I'll say, okay, when was the last time that Kawasaki changed its 450 model? Because they do it every 4 years. They redo the whole thing and they go, well, bikes change all the time. It's best to look up at the manufacturer settings to know the truth. And it's like, you don't know. You don't know. This is easily, you could easily find this I could find it in 5 minutes in just motocross articles, but it has no freaking clue. So if it knows nothing about a subject that you know a ton about, just think about what it's telling you on subjects you know nothing about and it's supposed to know a lot about. So astrophysics or something like that. I know about astrophysics, but I can guarantee you that a lot of the stuff it's telling me is wrong. I was asking it recently, do we have the technology to detect a Dyson sphere in a distant solar system? And it goes, nope, we don't have it. And I go, well, what about Tabby Star? And they go, well, at one point, scientists did think that was possibly a Dyson sphere, but now they don't. And I go, well, wait a minute. If at one point they thought that it was a Dyson sphere, that means we have the technology to detect a Dyson sphere. And it just goes, no, we don't. It's like, all right, well, you're an idiot.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we got it. I'll have your the link to your website in the description of the podcast so people can go and grab your books. Don, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'll have you on again sometime. Let me know when you have a new book coming out and we'll have you on. I could talk to you forever. I love sci-fi, guys. Have a good night.